Okay, so this is what we start with. This is an image I downloaded, and then what I did on my phone was just take away all the complex parts that I'm not going to be able to replicate. I mean, I probably could, but that would be a hell of a long project. So with it being in its most basic components, this gives us a good shot of being able to do this. What I did was overlay a grid. That was just a basic app on the phone as well. And then I did it in a 12 by 12 section. Now the reason for this is because my planer is only a 12-inch planer. So 12 inches is the maximum that I can fit through it. So every one of these sections here is an inch wide. Now it goes a bit funny on the length because obviously it's longer than it is wide. So there were some basic calculations that kind of had to be done. And it was like a ratio of like 1.5875. So for the length of every one of these squares, it had to be times by 1.5875. Then what we did was we overlaid this grid onto some ply that I'd rescued from a friend's house. And as you can see, it's broken again down into its most basic components. Now, I'm not going to lie, this was a bit of a faff. And the Falcon isn't actually, I mean, it looks circular, but actually it's a slight elliptical shape as well, especially this rear end. So you can't really take a center point and kind of draw this out. There's a technique for drawing elliptical shapes on a grid that I might do in future. It's kind of interesting if you're really anally retentive when drawing, which I was and still am. But you just basically overlay it, draw it out, and I've kind of jumped the gun a little here in showing you this, but I'll show you some footage of cutting it out. I mean, I use a bandsaw and a coping saw. This could be probably done with a jigsaw as well, and definitely done with a coping saw. It might take a little bit longer, but it can definitely be done. So what we're going to do is, hopefully in this series, is I'm going to take you through a few of the techniques that I've used on other boards, and I'll try and implement them on. What I need to do is order a couple of little bits and bobs in order to create these small circles. Now I might have to create a small jig. I don't know if I can get away with a sort of circle cutter, but they're generally, I think these are an inch across, and the circle cutters that I've been looking at are only 30 mil minimum, which might pose a little bit of a problem, but I think I can set up a small jig to do these. So yeah, I'll show you some ways of doing this later on in the series, but the first thing we need to do is I need to finish this off. You can see that I've cut kind of close to where it is. This ellipse here, I think I'm going to have to eyeball this. I could probably get the French curves out and try and get it as close as possible, but that's going to be a little difficult. Now, here's a little thing. These nail files, every girl's best friend, not necessarily mine because I tend to chew my nails. But these come in different varying sizes. Grits. And you can find them on Amazon. These are 100 and 180. I have previously had, I think they do them in 120 and 240 as well. And they're pretty good for getting around curves as well because they've got a flexible element to them. Sometimes they're also called emery board as well. Nail files, emery board, same stuff. But it will allow me to kind of get into these tight areas here eventually, and using a series of files as well. And we'll just crack on and get this shape done out first, and then we'll come back to materials. So I've managed to touch up a few of the areas around here. Went the quick route and did it on the belt sander and disc sander. The area we have to address is this area down here. Now, the easiest way to do this, well, you can eyeball it, but is by using a series of French curves which should give us a rough sort of elliptical neatness to it. Now the only trouble is that when you do these, you'll draw one side, and then what you'll have to do is flip it and draw the other side. But then how do you know that you've got the exact same symmetry on both sides? So what you'll have to do is take a bit of tape, and that's sort of about there. So if we take a piece of tape and bend it over, then we know that that area is kind of covered, and that area there. So we'll take a piece of tape here and a piece of tape there. So what we're looking at is trying to get this as close as possible to a good fit. Okay, let's try this. So this is the center point here, and you can't see it, but there is a point here. So let's give it a whirl. Let's draw this curve here. That's not bad. It's pretty close. So what we do then is look here and take this mark and transfer it to the other side. Now we should be able to kind of eyeball this. So if we put that mark there, put that mark there, and then give it a swizz. There we go. So I'm happy with that. That's kind of close enough. What we'll do is take that straight back to the belt sander again. So what we've done is we've nibbled away with using the bandsaw, got it a little bit closer, spent some time sanding, filing. These areas here, a little tricky to get to. Ended up having to use the Stanley knife to just cut slightly into here. It won't matter so much later on, but it's close enough. It's just me being anally retentive. The only thing was that in using the bandsaw to get as close as possible, I ended up nibbling far too much out of this area. The beauty of power tools is that, you know, they're quicker, but so are the mistakes. So I had to use some filler here, wait for it to go off, and then start sculpting it. The way that I did this to make sure that this was the same as this side was very simply took the piece of paper here. Now I know that this is the side that I want, which is good. So all I did was flip it over and mark an outline around the edge. And then that meant that when it came to doing this side, I could just keep filing, shaping, sanding, and then eventually marrying it back up to this line until it was close enough. So lesson for you there. Now that we've got it all down, we need to talk about materials. So because there are so many little components here, what I'm thinking of, because I like reusing and scavenging a bit, is a neighbour has some of this oak flooring. It's white oak, and they're all offcuts, but they are long enough for me to be able to fit this onto. Unfortunately, not wide enough, but that's okay. I'll just have to sort of cut a strip that'll run down the middle. I mean, eventually most of it's going to be cut away into different sections, so it's not going to be too much of a biggie. It'll just mean a fair bit of gluing. The only thing is this here. Now, you can see on the back, it's relatively smooth. I mean, you can still, don't know if you can quite see, but there are some saw marks here. I might keep this on the bottom. The only other thing is that obviously if you're rescuing materials, there's this. Now, it's not translating too much across the camera. So what I'll do is I'll show you. It does have a slight concave to it. Now, if I flatten this out, I'm going to lose some over the edge here and some on the bottom here, which is obviously going to thin the material out because you're taking the average across there. So what I'm trying to do is sift through and find, you can see it's more pronounced there. That isn't so bad, it's a little convex. And that is a perfect example of definitely not. So if I want to keep this pattern on the bottom here, I'm gonna have to find some straighter pieces. It might be that in the end I can't find any material that's flat enough and doesn't have any cupping, so I'm going to end up having to probably remove this profile here and just thin the material down a bit. Shouldn't be too much of a problem. What is that? So 16 mil. That's not too bad. We can work with that. We can work with that. The other thing that I'm going to do is incorporate some of this Purple Heart. So the idea will be these areas here. Not sure about these. Might just fill those. But these areas here, I'm going to cut some small circular discs, and then I will probably lock them in place and use a smaller Forstner bit to just excavate about, I don't know, maybe 2-3 mil deep into there, and then I'll be able to fill those with resin. But I'll show you that later. So materials wise, I'm just probably going to have to do a bit of planing, see if I can find some material that'll work, and that's just part of the process. When it comes to the geometry, I know these shapes look like they're a bit difficult, but actually if you just think that this is a straight line, this is your horizontal, and this is the angle that you're actually achieving, wanting to get. So I follow the lines through from this side down to this side, and we've got 14.5 degrees. So what I'm going to have to do for that as well is make a little jig to be able to slice that off, and then I might have to end up having to put that on the belt sander and just get it flat and perfect. What I will do as well later on this, on the underside of the eventual board, is put some feet on there. What I used to do with my other boards is there would be a set of these curved feet on either end. And these are just very, very simple jigs. Bit of brown packing tape there. And all I did was just mark out the radius that I wanted. Has to be slightly more than you want, because when you're gluing it up, it's obviously under pressure and being pinned down. And once you release it, that tension releases and it pops up a little bit either side. I mean, it doesn't mean that there's going to be a massive amount of deviation, but there will be probably a small amount. What these also allow me to do later on is, once they're done, is to pin them down and use these two edges to get a rough flat on the bottom of the feet. But I'll show you how to do that, and that's just using veneer. Or, if I was going for something a little different, I've got a door handle jig that I made a while ago. So you can see here, hopefully, these are laminated. It's 9 layers of veneer, all glued together. And this is essentially sort of what the feet will look like. In order to marry these to the bottom of the eventual board, there's another jig I'll have to show you. I'm not sure of another way on how to do this, but essentially what it does is it uses the radius of the blade on the table saw to dictate what this curvature is, and that's how they're married up in the end. If you go onto the Instagram, you'll see some examples. You might not see the whole process, but you'll see some examples of boards where they have these kind of feet on them. So the next part is finding the right material and planing it down. You can see that it's got some rock to it. So what we'll do is all these offcuts are what I keep, just in case. They're all varying thicknesses. You probably could cut some of your own. You might even be able to use window packers to be able to do it, but these are pretty useful. Just try to find where it balances. You see there's more rock on this side than there is on that side, so we're going to have to go for some thin stuff. I'll show you the next bit. It's essentially just gluing. So this piece of oak wasn't just slightly cupped, it's also got a slight bend along the length as well. And these wedges, just putting them in until you feel resistance. If you push any further, you're going to essentially just tilt it over more. So we'll just leave that there. The glue gun is heating up. It's a bit cold in the workshop, so it's going to take a little bit of time. And then what we'll do is we'll put it through the planer, get it all leveled off, and we'll come back at a time when it's more interesting. So that's it all glued up using the hot glue gun. Just going to wait a couple of minutes for it to fully set. Now the reason that the board isn't orientated dead straight is because it's a 12-inch planer, so I may as well use as much of the blade as I can. The other thing is as well, you know, if I keep running it down the center, most of the wear on the blades is going to be in the center. So this just kind of extends the life of the blade a little bit, at least in my head. Almost forgot. One more thing before it goes into the planer. Just so they can detect if there's any low spots and high spots. We've got all our oak milled up here. This bit I quite like. I'm thinking that this end is going to be nearer the port. That might create a kind of smoky effect. So it doesn't look like it's going to kind of join up at the moment. And you can't see it. It's because the surface I've got it on is a bit rickety. But the template fits on here. The problem we've got is that the anally retentive side of me would love to strike a line dead center in this piece here. But using the lines here to mark it up centrally, you can see that we're off over the edge. So we're just going to have to move it slightly over to give ourselves enough material, which brings the center line almost on this join here. But that's fine. So what we'll do is we'll get this all glued up, get it all together, and then we'll start cutting out.